How to make the most out of international business travel in mid-2022 as a sales professional. This is what we'll try to address in this video. So as of recording this video, which is mid-2022, it seems to be the easiest to travel internationally it has been since the 2020 thing happened. Although it is easier now to travel internationally, probably most of us in the SaaS space will travel less internationally for business than we used to, for a variety of reasons, from the increased, nevertheless, difficulty of traveling internationally, all the logistics involved in that, to increased cost, and how the landscape of doing business internationally has changed since 2020. So if you are planning on organizing international business travel, it is important to make the most out of it. And in this video, we'll give a few tips on how to do just that. Also, if perhaps you need more justification to organize an international business trip and get it approved as compared with previously, this video will come in handy for that as well. All right, so the first tip, and probably a quite obvious one, is that you need to plan and schedule things way in advance as compared with what you perhaps were able to get away with on your international business travel in the past. Different countries have different requirements for entry and for potential stay in a particular place. And these you need to understand way in advance to prepare anything that's needed for that. Also, of course, you need to make sure you monitor that, or people on your team monitor that in case anything changes. So, the ability to buy a ticket and fly somewhere next day very easily, unfortunately, that is for most countries, that is really gone. So apart from those logistics, also you'll need to make sure to schedule as many high quality meetings into your international trip as possible. Now you're probably thinking this is something I used to always do, even before 2020, for my business travel in general or my international trips. But I would say it's even more important now, because with everything going on, you really don't know whether perhaps traveling to the same place internationally for business, whether that's going to be possible, for your next travel window that you're planning. So it is very important to make the most out of those trips. Also, for a variety of reasons, for instance, a lot of people are moving to more remote locations from the hub, the big city where they used to live, and a couple of other reasons. It might be more difficult to get meetings scheduled with people in the destination you're traveling to internationally as compared with before. So it is important to make sure to give people a lot of notice and then schedule way in advance to make the most out of that international travel. Now, a very important thing is to ensure you have a very clear purpose for those meetings when you'll be trying to schedule them, trying to invite people to meet you during your international travel. I'm sure there will be plenty of old customers for you or partner contacts that won't need much of a reason at all and will just really love the opportunity to meet you face to face as you're traveling. But for a lot of other people, they will need a strong reason for that, to meet with you, think prospects, customers, etc. Again, especially if maybe it involves a bit more of a commute than it used to, etc. So when you'll be scheduling those meetings, which again, you should have as many quality meetings as possible on that trip, make sure you have a very strong purpose for that meeting that is communicated to the people you want to schedule meetings with. So the next point, which I've seen a lot of people neglect, but I think if you can nail this one, it will be super helpful to making the most out of your international travel, is to make sure you let people know in advance as you'll be booking those meetings, as you'll be confirming them, that it is a bit of a big deal for you to travel internationally to their destinations and to meet with them. In other words, being in sales, you have to sell that meeting as something that's of rather high value to both sides. Again, because of these additional complications / logistics of international travel and the increased costs, your prospect, partner, customer, whoever you're meeting, it's important that they understand the value of you traveling internationally to meet with them in person. So this will hopefully help you get that meeting you want in the first place, but also help reduce the risk of any meeting that is scheduled falling through last minute or otherwise. And this is a rather important point because, for instance, I can think of a couple of existing customers and partners that I would have no problem getting that meeting scheduled in the first place. However, I also know that typically, historically, they have a propensity to canceling last minute, rescheduling last minute. And if you are going on an international business trip just for a couple of days and facing something like that, especially again last minute, that really can mean that you have, half a day, or if it's more meetings like that, even more time on your trip wasted. And that brings me to another very important point, and that is to ensure that you have alternatives in place to cover for these possible meetings, to the degree that's possible, of course. I mean, think over the last year or so how many meetings you have had scheduled with people who don't have that propensity to reschedule things or cancel them. However, you had to cancel or move because somebody got sick, or perhaps they were a close contact of somebody else that got sick. These things definitely happen. So it's important to try to have alternatives in place. Now, that probably could be a whole video within itself to just discuss the delicate diplomacy of doing that, because if this is done incorrectly, this kind of planning, it can cause people to have a wrong idea and get offended. So again, you need to make sure that this is done very strategically and diplomatically, but have those alternatives in place so that in case, even though you communicate the high value of your travel and your meetings, things fall through for reasons you cannot control, you can have hopefully some alternatives to still make the most out of your international travel. Big topic, unfortunately, I have to limit myself in this video. But another very important thing when it comes to scheduling and making the most out of international travel in mid-2022 is to make sure that you schedule meetings on your travel with things that are very difficult to do remotely, to make the most out of your trip, get the most value for yourself and your organization. So this is of course highly context dependent and depends on who are you meeting, what's your relationship with them, the history there, as well as the standards and caveats for your industry, or maybe even your space within the industry. So what I like to do is focus on the bond and rapport building activities. So have that coffee, that meal, perhaps that drink with your prospect, customer, partner, where that's appropriate. So whatever you do, make sure you don't just do things like schedule a meeting with a group of people in an office room and then just show them slides, PowerPoint slides on a projector, right? Again, you have to make sure that you schedule things that are different, that are more difficult, a lot more difficult or impossible, hopefully, to do remotely. Big topic, but hopefully the structure outline here and those couple of tips have been helpful to you. And as always, if you need help with your international sales strategy and execution in the context of SaaS and Asia Pacific, don't hesitate to reach out to us.